Hey everybody, Corey from Aquarium Co-op. Today I want to talk about pea puffers or the Indian dwarf puffer. It's probably our number one requested video at this point that we haven't done. And part of it is, I don't know, I'm very passionate about puffers, but I don't like doing species profile videos in the way that people typically do them. So let me start by saying if you're looking for purely facts, pull up Wikipedia, read the pHs, that they come from India, and what kind of hardness and all that kind of stuff. What I'm going to deliver you today is how to practically keep them in your aquarium. That is, I feel, way more practical and better advice, and that's the video I want to make. I want to make that as opposed to here's a teleprompter, I'm just going to read off of it. So first, pea puffers get to about an inch. They're relatively small. They're pretty territorial. They're super awesome. That's why we're talking about them, right? The price is going to be anywhere from, you can get them as cheap as $3 up to almost, $10, $12, $15, depending on where you're at. I know my store sells them at $10, but we go through quite a bit of a deworming process and that type of thing. And, you'll see shots if we got hundreds of them, we import them. And luckily now, most times they're captive raised, which is super cool. But you can also still get them wild caught. So when they're wild caught, you need to do a little bit more deworming and be a little bit more careful. So the general rule of wisdom is one pea puffer can live in a 5-gallon aquarium, and then maybe as many as one pea puffer per every 3 gallons after that. So in a 10-gallon, you might be able to shoehorn in a group of 3, and in a 20, maybe you can do 6 or 7. But it really is going to come down to how you set up that environment. A bare tank with like just some gravel, one plant, fake plastic plant, and 3 pea puffers is going to be a battle zone. There's not enough territories and that type of thing. So if you had a real lush jungle aquarium with tons of plants, that makes a lot more sense to have maybe 3 of those guys or 6 of those guys in there. And then when you can, having male and female in correct groups can be very important. Now when you buy them, they tend to be assorted. What I mean by that is they're going to be too young to sex, so you're getting males and females. You won't know. You buy your group, and then as they mature out, the males will get deeper coloration. They're going to get like a stripe or a dot on their belly, where females typically just have yellow. The males are also more slender. Females tend to be more plump. And you can start seeing who's really aggressive. Typically, the males are very aggressive. So if they don't have kind of 2 or 3 girls for every boy, that tends to be a problem. And so if you've got your 5-gallon tank and you got one puffer in there, well, there's no one for them to fight with. So that's kind of an awesome scenario. But if you got a 10-gallon and you buy 3, don't be shocked when it comes 8 months down the road. You're going, oh man, I've got 2 males and a girl. It's super aggressive. You probably need to rehome at least one of the boys. And if the boy and girl works out, great. If that doesn't work out, maybe you're on a hunt to find a 3rd female. When it comes to water parameters, they can live in a pretty wide variety. Now, I've seen them go as low as 6'4". I feel like that's kind of really at the bottom edge there, and you drop too much lower than that, you can start getting too acidic of water and skin issues and that type of thing. And as high as 8.4, I've seen people keep them in. So that's a huge range. Now, if you can keep it stable, usually they're just happy. So like I myself at the store, and here we have water that's about 7.0. With crushed coral and that type of thing, maybe it's 7.2. They seem to thrive in that. And so in general, I recommend water that's more at that 7.2 to 7.5 area. And that's maybe so you have multiple tanks at this point, and you might have some snails growing over in another tank. If that water's too acidic, you don't get snails, and then you can't feed them to the puffer. When it comes to diet, they are hardcore carnivores. So things like frozen bloodworms, frozen brine shrimp, they will love to eat that. They would also eat little snails. They'll eat that as well. Now, one of the questions that comes up with puffers a lot is, do you have to trim their teeth? Do I have to feed them snails all the time? Luckily, with the pea puffers, either A, their teeth stop growing, or B, they grow so slow that it never becomes an issue. So they can live on a diet of frozen foods their entire life and do well. Now, the trick you don't want to fall for is you don't want to only feed them bloodworms or only feed them brine shrimp or something like that, because over time they'll get deficiencies and that will be a problem, but their teeth themselves won't be the problem. So a wide variety of frozen foods, dry food typically they'll never take to. I'm not going to say it's never happened, but you should go into it going, okay, I'm going to have to provide them frozen or live foods. You can do live black worms, you can do live bloodworms, you can do snails, you can do all those little things, but really I think majority of the people are going to go with frozen foods. When it comes to temperature, I would say anything above 74 to 82, somewhere in that range, keep it stable. I've seen them kept lower. I haven't really seen them kept much higher than 82. You might be able to go as high as 84, but I think you're going to start causing some stress. So general tropical temperatures of 74 to 82, somewhere in that range. I think the big thing that comes from this is the big question, what can I keep with them? What can they go with? And unfortunately, there's no easy answer there. Some of them do great with others, like the real timid and peaceful. And then most of them are kind of terrors. They're really territorial and they like to guard their home. So each one's going to be different. Think about it like a dog. If you had a dog and you're going to bring another dog home, you can't guarantee that they will like each other. Same thing with the fish. And if you have a really aggressive dog, let's say you have a dog that goes and tries to attack any person and any dog it ever comes in contact with, you probably know if I bring a new dog home, it's going to fight. And that's kind of the same thing with the pea puffer. If we already know it's an aggressive species, 9 times out of 10, it will be aggressive. 1 out of 10 times, you go, oh no, I was just looking for a buddy. It's my new best friend. So I would go into it thinking that they are a species tank, meaning you set up a tank for them, you pretty much only keep them, and you deal with it accordingly. And that means even algae eaters and stuff like that. So when you build that tank, realize like, oh, I'd have to scrape algae. So it usually becomes really beneficial to keep a well-balanced planted tank for these guys. It keeps them active and consumes the extra bioload from all that extra frozen protein-rich foods we're feeding. And if we balance it right, we don't get algae growing, we get plants growing instead. And you've got this nice little underwater world with these little, helicopter-looking fish moving around. And, I hate to even have to say this, but always more is better. So the more water you have, the better. So some people say, you can't keep them in a 5, you can't keep them in a 10, you can't keep them in a 55. The bigger the aquarium you want to dedicate, usually the easier it's going to be for you and the more they'll appreciate it. That being said, if you build a 500-gallon pea puffer tank and you get bored after 5 months, it's kind of a waste. So pea puffers, I recommend that they're not your first aquarium or your only aquarium. Maybe you've got 1 or 2 other aquariums. Maybe you've got your community tank, you've got your African cichlids, and now you have a puffer tank. If you have just one 20-gallon tank and it's got 5 pea puffers in it, a lot of times people get bored in that 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year, and they'll live up to, almost 10 years depending on the temperature you keep them. So they're kind of a long-term commitment fish. They've got some special needs, but they do have wicked good vision, and they swim differently than other fish. They're very inquisitive. They can look at stuff, and they'll recognize you as the owner. So they are great little water pets, and I do recommend them. Pea puffers, Indian dwarf puffer, whatever you want to call them. They are great. You can find them at your local stores. Usually not a box store. You have to go to like a local fish store. But look to see how healthy they are. Ask what they're feeding them. Make sure they got full bellies. I personally recommend deworming them. We bring them in all the time. We don't use meds at half strength or anything like that. We use full strength meds on them, even though they are a scaleless fish. They do have scales. It's more like human skin as opposed to like reptile scales. So they do have scales, but in general, the medicines, we don't half dose or anything like that. We use normal dose. And to deworm, we use general cure. If they've been doing a lot of fighting at the store, we might use erythromycin to clear up those bacterial infections from the wounds. And if they had ick, which can happen sometimes from all the stress of being too many and fighting, we use Aquarium Solutions Ick X. So I can at least speak to those 3 medicines to know that they are pea puffer safe the way we keep it. And we also have good luck with praziquantel or Prazipro from Hikari. That works well also. So that's all my practical tips. I think with all of that, you can get in and you can keep them. Obviously, you have to take into account the very basic things like they're going to need a filter, they're going to need a heater, they need an aquarium, they need someone to feed them, they need a stable environment. But the specific things to pea puffers, I think we covered most of those. And if not, leave a comment down below and we'll get a big comment section going, and people that are interested can read and leave your experiences and what they've lived with, what they haven't lived with, and would you recommend them, and are you keeping them? So hopefully that does justice to this species profile, and we'll see you in the next one.